Hello.
Hello, Amy.
How are ya?
Good.
Hang on, I'm just getting rid of the center projector.
There's a delay.
There's a delay, really?
Well, I'm watching myself speak, and then my lips are moving on the screen.
Oh. All right. So I've got track on, I've got self view on, so now we'll set up for the panel. Oh, and then I'll have the rear camera on the whole time, actually. That's what I really
Yeah.
want.
So you don't want me. I'm gonna shut my
No.
video off.
You don't want.
You don't need me.
No. Now that I know you're there, you can help.
Now that I know you're there.
Exactly.
I'm here, Amy.
Yep.
I'm the voice behind the curtain.
Exactly. There we go. That's fine. I know there are. There we go. The chairs without the desks. That's what we want. On our walk, I met one of the panelists, Shannon, and her family, her 2 kids. So, you know, and one of them, well, they both really like the dog, and the dog really liked them. So I got a couple of sheets of stickers to give them.
Oh.
Those things are going to be so handy for all kinds of things.
I know, right?
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Some of these have arms and some of them don't, even if they don't have the desks. Anyway, it's 4. Why did I think I had 5 panelists? It's
You
4.
do.
Oh, I do. So is one
You
not
do.
doing? Is one of them not doing one-to-ones?
No, you should. No, you have 5 clipboards. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I am seeing only 4. I am missing.
I leave one on my desk.
I don't know. I have Tixo, if that's how you pronounce your name, Tony, Ravi, and Shannon.
You've got to have Kate because I.
Oh, is it underneath the parking permit? It's
Yes.
underneath. Ah, thanks.
Because I wanted you to know who it belonged to.
Got
and then
it. Hey,
Shannon just sent me her stuff, and so I forwarded it to parking.
Great. Great. Okay. Hi there.
Hello.
How are you? You would be so proud of how, look at, I'm already on. I'm a pro. already.
Yes.
You're gonna be able to hire me next year.
Well, what are you doing this summer? We need to hire some people. So you have, so what else is here?
Well,
Because
so because they're all in person, we probably might need mics. In
Okay.
case some of them are a little soft spoken. The only reason why we're doing the webinar is to record it.
Okay,
So I'm gonna manage the camera.
okay.
That's why I'm getting set up now, so I can see what they're gonna look like. There's Rachel.
Hello.
Hello.
And, yeah,
Let's see.
and actually,
So-
I'm realizing I'm gonna move the table over here, Rachel, so they can be signing.
Yeah.
up Talking.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
And there's this, so both these mics work good.
Great,
They're fully charged.
great.
Do you want me to leave them up over there?
Actually, we could just leave them on the chairs.
Amy,
No.
you might want to back up that camera because I don't see all those chairs.
Okay, or I can back up the chairs too a little bit now that I've moved the table.
That's
But-
better.
Yeah.
That's much better.
Do you want me to help? You want to, you pretty much set with chairs there, or do you need some help?
Sure, you can help. Oh, and actually. I
How
need
many do you need?
One more chair. Well, we've got about 20 people coming, I think, maybe, but we'll
See a
see.
circle?
Yeah, and sort of the semi, you know, like so that they're not.
No.
And then I'm gonna get one more without a desk for the moderator. And.
Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah, it could be a circle. That's true.
Oh, I don't know what you meant. I'm sorry. Wait a second, I'm going.
I was
whatever
sort
you
of
want.
thinking of like a semicircle where at least it's kind of an intimate audience. So where they're not like all the way around, but like this kind of thing.
Like a
Yeah.
chevron.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right.
Chevron. Yeah. And then, you know, in this way, they'll be sure to, oh, somebody lost their key.
7, 8, 9, 20, 21,
Oh,
22,
oh,
23.
it's-
You said 25?
What's that?
I'm sorry, you said 25?
It's hard to know. I
Okay.
mean,
I think I need
18
a couple more
RSVP'd and they were encouraged to just show up.
Okay.
So it's hard to know. How many won't be here? You know, so as long as there's,
What is the subject today?
tonight it's Chinese.
Oh,
Yeah,
what is it? It's all just based upon random, just different topics, or is there a theme?
no. So there, the whole idea behind the field guide is bringing people back by major.
Oh, cool.
So then they tell their story of their path from their major to their career in life. And the whole idea is that the students learn that it's not linear, that you can major in anything. It can take you in all these directions.
Nice.
And your liberal arts major serves you no matter what, because
Cool.
they talk about how they're, you know, like in Chinese, they're going to talk about communicate. I guarantee they're going to talk about how they learn to communicate,
Okay.
regardless of, you know, and I think, and then actually, I think with this batch, none of them use Chinese as part of their career, but they use, some of them might use languages like they do international work.
Cool.
So it's great. So students, you could just see them kind of like light bulbs go off like, oh, okay, I don't need to like
Like a relief.
totally.
Yeah.
And the seniors hold on to every word when they understand that, you know, the steps that you're taking have, it's not about the major, you know, and it's not about, and that you will be fine, that people, even if
Right.
you have no clue what you want to do,
Nice.
and the first destination is not define you, all of that stuff that they need to hear. So it's just, you know, we can
Cool.
tell them stuff till it's,
Yeah.
we're blue in the face and, you know, they just think that's.
Yeah, to
crap.
hear from there.
But when they hear it from the alumni, exactly.
Awesome.
And then we bring these little sheets so that alumni then are available for little one-to-one chats tomorrow morning. Isn't that cool?
Very cool.
And this department had the money to bring them all in person from literally all over the globe.
Wow.
Yeah, whereas most departments don't have that kind of cash, but
That's awesome.
yeah. Yeah.
How they've been, you know, I mean, usually, you know, I have a student come in and stuff like that. I haven't attended it. Like, how are they, pretty, you know, what do you call it? A lot of people coming each week or?
Yeah, you know, it depends. Like this semester, there were a lot of the smaller departments that I've never done, like American Studies and Philosophy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we used to do these in Atwater as a dinner thing.
Oh, really?
And so
Okay.
then you'd get a bigger crowd because
Yeah.
you'd get dinner and,
Yeah.
you know, we'd get like 30 to 35. but
Like
not always.
pre-COVID or just?
This was
you know,
pre-COVID,
wages?
exactly. And then, so since COVID, we were doing them, you know, just Zoom. And then once we saw the technology here and we're more in person, we saw how we could do a hybrid. And
Yeah.
so that's why we booked them all in here, because we saw what we could do. Where at least even if the alumni are online, the students could all gather. And they've been, so I would say the average this spring has been about 15, not great.
Yeah.
But for some of the departments that are so much smaller, it was fine.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's nice about this room is you could have 10 or 15 and it still looks like a decent enough crowd.
Is it the same
know?
crew like coming sometimes? You notice the same faces or they just need to hear one kind of, or is it the people from the department?
It's usually because it's the department. I mean, we
Okay.
do our outreach, but it's
Yeah.
really the department we rely on to do their outreach to their
Okay.
majors. And
So
So
I'm
it-
wondering if you
yeah.
can take that screen off with the camera with the X through it.
That's you.
I know, but is there a way to not have that
Oh.
go up? 'Cause
Yeah, you know what? I think there might be. Hold on here.
that's true. We didn't think about that.
There was they made some changes on this touch panel. Let me see.
Get
Okay,
pens.
hold on here.
Thank you for your help, Joe.
Well, what I can do is,
Just put the screen up.
yeah, hold on one second here.
And you're Joe, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Good,
just
I got
didn't
it
want
right.
to, like, that might not look good. That's good. I'm still here.
How could you even see that?
Huh?
How could you see? Oh, because it's in the background. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the video, I don't want it to be like,
Right. Now, so there's nobody though that's zooming in though, are there?
no,
Oh, okay.
just me
Right, we
recording.
just-
Oh, that's right.
So
You
we
said
can
it's
record.
recording. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's all right.
Yep. No, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. Like we
Okay.
realized.
You want to show how to do this for future times? I mean,
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
The student's not here, but,
I guess so.
so, just, you kind of exit out of that camera
Yeah,
setting
got
and you
it.
go to display
Yeah.
screen and you can mute
Oh.
that. So, like that.
Oh, sure.
That's it.
Hey,
Hello,
So just
how are you?
mute.
I'm
Great,
well. How are
okay.
you?
I have learned that sometimes, if the controls aren't responsive,
Mhm.
I reboot. And it makes all the difference. Like sometimes,
Yeah.
however, somebody before me left it.
That's,
And-
it's kooky. It's either something like that, or sometimes we have to be called in because it's kind of in the back here. We have to unlock it and it's just
Oh,
plugging
God.
in and out of the
Oh,
cord
my
and that's it.
God.
But yeah, it's called
Exactly.
power cycling it. So
Right,
it's just.
exactly. Hi there.
Hi,
Are you?
I am a panelist. Yes,
You are a
Tony.
panelist. You are Tony.
Yes,
Nice to meet you, Tony. I'm Amy.
Amy, nice to meet you.
Nice to
We've
meet
been
you.
to-
Thank you. Love your mask.
Thank you.
And this is my colleague Alicia.
Hi, Tony.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks
to
for
meet you.
making the trip.
Yeah, I was about to say
course.
the same thing. Thank you for making the trip.
It was a long trip, but it's.
Was it?
Yeah,
How long you staying?
I'm here until Saturday morning and then I
Okay.
drive to Boston to see some friends for 2 days before I fly
Oh,
back to California.
good. Well, that's the idea. Make use of the trip, because it was, yeah, you came from the, like, San Francisco.
I came from San Francisco. I've been on 3 consecutive work trips and then I got on a flight too.
Oh.
I travel a lot for work.
At
So.
least it's a beautiful day.
Oh, yes. I
And it
was
is,
telling,
yeah.
my boyfriend is here as well, and I was
Oh,
telling him,
good.
I was like, he was like, oh, what's Middlebury like at the end of April? I'm like, it's probably gonna be 20 degrees. or 50."
There's
You
snow
pick one.
somewhere.
Yeah,
It snowed
exactly.
last
I know it
night,
snowed
but
last night at
didn't-
Ripton, so.
Yeah,
We actually, last night we drove through,
okay.
so I was like, oh, look, there's a snowball and all that stuff. So,
Because you
yeah.
flew into Boston and then drove.
Flew into
up.
Boston and drove up here,
Okay.
yep.
Great. So do you need a parking pass for tomorrow?
I should be fine. Do we have like, the schedule already as well as the location? I know that was still
So,
TBD.
I'll show you what we have so far.
Great.
And what we do is we bring the signups for here so that students, when they get one, because I talk about them in my little opening remarks. I
Okay.
sort of say, they're here for you, da, 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 da. If you like what they say, you don't have to care what their industry is, whatever.
Okay.
Or they might not even have known about them. So you may get a few more slots, and so you'll know before you leave here
Great.
what time you start. Right now you have a 9:20 and that would be it. And here's where my colleague Rachel, who's on the other side of the camera, who you don't see, and it's only on so we can record. She will be there in the bottom floor of the library to help. But she's already put you in.
Davis Library. Okay,
150
great.
games.
Do
So she'll
we-
be down there.
Okay, great. I tried to go to Davis this morning. Do
Yeah.
you need a key card to get in?
You
You
do. don't
do. You do. But
Oh,
I will, you can't see me, but you can hear me. I
Right.
will, make sure you guys can get in.
thank you. I want
Yeah,
to show.
I'll be
so.
waiting, looking for
Right.
you guys.
Right. And let me know if you need my help with that too, Rachel. In the morning.
Yeah, I might
Oh,
need that in the morning.
Yeah, I have a 10 o'clock coffee meeting off site, but if you need me for 9 o'clock or something.
Yeah, let's plan on that,
Okay.
because
all
they
right.
might come at different times,
Yep, so I can see
you know,
several.
9:10.
3 already have 9 o'clocks. So I'll make sure that I'm there a little before 9 to 11. Okay,
Sounds good.
and then we'll go from there. Cool.
Awesome.
And you were buddies with Tony when you were here, right?
With who?
I'm sorry, with Ravi, sorry.
Ravi,
you're Tony.
yes, Ravi.
Yeah,
I was, we were
Ravi,
best.
that's how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, that's how you
Okay.
pronounce it.
Okay.
We are very close friends.
Oh,
We were
nice.
best friends at that. So.
Oh, nice, okay, and there are they, you said?
Sorry, Ravi, it goes by, I think Ravi uses he and him pronoun.
Okay,
Hi, Rachel.
Should I sit? should
so,
sit
I mean,
here?
we're gonna put you here.
Hello, Alicia.
Take your
Where's the
time.
camera? Here.
It's
So-
turned off.
Oh,
back there. I'll show
You
you.
can't
wow.
see me.
I'll show ya.
Where is Thomas Moran gonna sit, Professor Moran?
So I'm not exactly sure, but that's why there are 6 seats. up
Okay,
there.
well, I'll
So,
just post up
yeah.
here until someone tells me otherwise. so-
Exactly. We're good. Check this out. Oh, everything's off there? How do you, I know. Don't tell me. I'm gonna do it myself. Let's see. You go away. All right, the stream control is not going on.
So Tony, when was the last time you were in Middlebury?
5-year reunion, so it's 2018.
Please.
Oh, no worries, I've been sitting on.
So
it,
I'm trying to push
it's
the
working.
display.
Yeah, my last time I came here
control
was
button.
2018, so it's 5-year reunion.
You
And
have to-
nothing's
you have to-
happening.
Right before everything locked down, I know, I think we were like one of the
That
last.
And that's
ones
how
to
you
that,
set
like,
it.
so-
push
Got
that to
it.
the
I
background
did.
and you got it.
Got
Oh, that
it,
must
okay.
be nice.
So when you
It was very
turn, so
different.
it's mute.
I actually
so
caught
I
up with
turn the mute- I
another
see.
professor,
There she
Okay.
is.
Hangju in
Great.
the
So
Chinese
that-
department,
so I'm
and what
gonna
I
do
said
this
to
myself.
her was,
So
when I
I'm
came
gonna
here
show
for 5-year
her.
reunion,
Got it.
it was like, it was like very nostalgic in a sense, and now that because it was just, 5 years out, now that I'm 9 years out, it feels, everything's still the same, obviously, but it's more removed.
Yeah.
So it feels very uncanny to like walk through here and be like, we were working in McCullough earlier, and my boyfriend was like, "Where's the bathroom?" I was like, "Walk out the door to your left." So it's like I know all of that still
Yeah.
very well, but
But you're in a new chapter of your life, so it just seems, that's a different chapter.
Right.
First, it's like 2 chapters away.
Yeah.
exactly. And I
They've
thought
been
about the
very good
equivalent
so
of
far.
I was a
They've always
senior
shown up
in
and then they'll
2013.
forget whatever.
Okay.
And I was
it is.
listening to me talk,
Yeah.
what year would
Just
that
so you
be?
know.
What class year would that be? And I thought 2002, and it freaked me out. I'm like, oh my god.
So Alicia, I just want to show you, excuse me.
Yes.
So that's the front camera, which is right there.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay,
And
And
then I
then,
saw- and that's
and then
right- right
here's
to
the
the-
rear
yeah.
camera. Whoops, I just did
Oh,
that. I
it's
blew it.
tracking's
Keep
on.
talking, yeah.
Hello? Test.
Yeah, I'll go back out. Whoops, nope. I'm still practicing my camera.
There he is.
And sometimes if you
Yeah.
press it, it goes really hard.
Exactly.
really
I'm
fast.
like, I apologize in advance if I make people dizzy. There.
Now, this is the only room on campus that has this capability, or there?
No, there's actually, RAJ's got a pretty sophisticated
Wow, that's
one.
pretty cool.
105's got a very sophisticated one in bottom of
There's
library.
Amy,
Okay.
that's really close.
Is it too close?
Oh, you,
Too close.
you want me to?
Okay.
You're got waist up of the panelists.
All right.
I cannot see,
Oh, I see.
anybody's
Yeah,
feet.
okay. Right, so go back. Oh,
There we go. Better.
Is that too far back?
I'm
I
trying to
think
get
that's
everybody
great.
in the circle. Is that,
I think
Okay.
that's great.
Okay.
okay. I can't go any lower than that. It's,
No,
Well,
that's
and
good.
if we put it on track,
it's, okay, it's off track, so if I put it on track,
let's see what
it
happens.
comes to me.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk, see if it
Yeah,
follows.
let's see if I'm talking enough, will it track
Nope.
me appropriately?
It's just not reliable enough.
It's not
Going
moving fast enough. All
anywhere.
right, so we'll leave it at that, with that setting. All
That's my, that's.
right. Great, thank you. I can see people coming now. There's Tom and the other alumni and some students. Great. So,
How's that?
Looks
how's that
good.
look?
Okay.
Great.
See you, bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
I'm gonna
I'm
put my
still- I'm still here.
Yeah. Oh, Alicia, here's the sign in. I'm gonna put you in charge of.
Yep.
Let me grab another pen out of the.
I have
bag.
one.
You got one?
And then we're just gonna enter them after the fact, right?
No, oh, you mean in terms of back to the
Enhancing.
office?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We,
Instead of-
you mean me?
Yeah.
Well, I do it too. When I have
I
my,
know.
I was like, I always enter, I put my names in.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. This. I'll still have my phone with me in case you need to text, but I don't know what you'll need to text me about anymore.
Okay, we'll see. Anything can happen.
True. It's true.
Oh.
Hello. How are you?
Oh, 啊，还好，我有点累。因为我们昨天晚上就到了波士顿，今天晚上我们
He's not gonna help the rest of us.
我对我就是我一会儿。
Hello, look at you all arriving at once.
Hi, welcome.
所以你开了5个小时的车呢。
Hello.
Hi, come on in.
Oh, I'm inside this time. You're so Tixo, so it's exactly how it smells.
Yeah.
So, you're welcome. I mean, nice to come in. What's that? I know, because I really wasn't here then. Working for organizations. But anyway, yeah, but thank you for making this room welcome. That's adorable.
Tony.
Nice to meet you.
It was terrible, but we got. This is my. I just came from 2 years ago.
Great. Yeah. Oh, good.
You're tired.
There's like rock students with you, literally.
Well, you know they better come, right?
I know.
Oh, yeah, you
They'll
should.
grab some more people off the
If there is a signal there, but I didn't see.
Great.
So, you know, you
Hi.
can always like, what's the process?
What's the process? So when we are ready, and I'll say this. We're.
Just a day on.
And so I guess what I thought I'd do is take Actually, I did. I lied to him. We already decided that bond part was gold.
I'm already seeing students sign up for.
Oh, really? Tony.
Oh, I do actually. Yeah.
Look at me. Either C said official.
Yeah.
Ask number 3, they can make it. It's the same. I am, but
Which you want, 5 or?
So there's a sign-in sheet going around if you guys help take responsibility to make sure that it gets all the way around. So we know that you were all here and accounted for. That'd be great. But you don't have to stop the chatter yet. Yeah. Okay. Well, you got it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what year was it?
2013.
Thank you, Joe.
You are?
You are definitely gonna talk. Yeah. Once or twice.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, maybe they have next year. But they went to the.
Are you sitting here?
Yeah, because we're already.
And I have mine in case we needed them.
Me and Val are in charge of it, so.
No, that was sort of a joke.
Do you want Oh, yeah. I have.
Let me know when. All right, we'll get started since there's already a great crowd right at 5 o'clock. Wow. Very impressed already. I'm Amy McGlashan. I work at the Center for Careers and Internships, and part of what I do is what we call academic outreach. So I help build bridges between the Center for Careers and Internships and academic departments to help tell the liberal arts story. So this is one of the ways that we do that. Before I talk a little bit about tonight, I want to mention some of the other ways that we share that message. The whole idea behind talking about the major, whether it be a panel coming back by major, whether it be our major guides, which I'll mention in a second, is to illustrate that you can choose any major here at Middlebury. You're here for liberal arts education. It will all serve you, and you don't need to, there's not a linear path from major to career. And part of what you'll hear is how our alumni went. Yes, they're already nodding their heads. And the idea is to, so that you can like get a glimpse of your future without getting too hung up on it. And in a way that helps you articulate the value of the liberal arts education more broadly. So for example, I don't know, have people seen these major guides? So nodding, some have nodded in your head. And the whole idea behind these is telling the story by front to back. So on the front is the major, what's it about? Why would someone choose that major? And specifically, what are the learning goals for the Chinese major? And then on the back, it's how does that those learning goals translate into professional competencies that you can talk about in any job interview or as you proceed through your life and career. And then just a sampling of the internships and jobs that Chinese majors have done in their time here or afterwards. And it's just a glimpse of the liberal arts major to career story. And a snapshot, and these are really helpful actually, like for your parents, if they're saying, what are you choosing Chinese for? I'm not gonna serve you, what are these? So you can say, do anything, and you'll hear the story tonight. So I want to share those with you and feel free to grab one. The other thing I would just want to briefly mention before we talk a little bit about the event tonight and tomorrow morning, is, are people familiar with mid to mid? So just a few, okay, so I'm glad I'm talking about this. So mid to mid is an incredible, you will find tonight, these 5 alumni are amazing. And they are just a sampling of our amazing alumni. And you can access any of our alumni in our mid to mid platform. That's exactly what it is. It's our alumni platform that students can access. It's kind of it's set up a little bit kind of like Tinder, kind of like LinkedIn, where it'll do algorithms based on your interests. You can enter by geography, by major, by whatever, and you'll get an array of alumni to take a look at. You look at their profiles, and if you want to start a conversation with one of them, you can do that. Students are invited to develop a mentoring relationship, to seek one-on-one career advice. I think you all are on it. If not, yes. Okay, so anyone can continue a conversation after tonight by reaching out to mid. So it's an amazing resource, and we hope that when you graduate, you will pay it forward and join mid to mid also. So over here are the sign-up sheets for the one-to-one chats tomorrow. Part of what I want to say about those. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at some of the bios on the website of our 5 alumni. You'll see there's kind of a connection to the major, kind of not, right? And so you don't have to be interested in necessarily the industry that they're in. If you like anything that they say about their journey, about their time here, about how they're navigating life, go ahead and sign up for a one-to-one chat. That's what they're here for, particularly in this one, where they came from Israel, Hawaii, that's right, Hawaii. But as far away as Hawaii and the West Coast and literally across the globe to be here with you today and tomorrow. So don't waste this opportunity. There are some slots left. The sign-up sheets are here. Go check out the times that are available tomorrow morning. They'll be meeting you in Davis Library in the bottom floor. And in general, this is the last field guide of the year. But we've done 9 of them this year. So the idea is we go through the majors. There are a few more chairs over there, but feel free to hang out on the day windows too. It's up to you. These 2 seats are available too. I will be using them. And oh my God. So that the idea is that we do these for not every major every year, but over the years we've done most of the majors. And I want to encourage you, whenever you see a sign for the field guides next year, just because you're not in that area of study or in that major, still take a look at who's coming. Because they could be, as you'll see tonight, they represent a broad array of careers and interests. And so you still may find that there's someone that you can connect with, even if they're not in your major area of study. So I don't know what the majors are that we're going to do for these field guide events next year, but I just want to plant that seed now, so that as you start seeing that we have our signature poster, that it looks the same and it's just the major that changes. So I encourage you to check out the website and see who's coming, because again, they're here for you. The only other thing I'll quickly say is you can't tell, but we're recording this because I'm pointing to the projection screen, but it doesn't matter. You can't see. That's partly why we're in this room, because the cameras are so great. So that if you, again, you'll be able to access some of the gems of what you hear from our alumni tonight in the future. And I think that's all I have, and I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Thank you. I'm Tom Moran, Chair of the Chinese Department. Brief. A lot of you are tired of listening to me already this year. First, on behalf of my colleagues, and I want them to introduce themselves in a moment, I want to thank Amy McGlashan and Alicia Gomez of CCI for the idea and the organization. And also, when you see Nicole Patterson in Voter, you can pass on your thanks to her, because Nicole handled a lot of the travel and lodging arrangements. So our thanks go to Nicole. I don't know everyone in the room. I've just introduced myself. I'd like my colleagues to please stand up and introduce themselves so all of you know all of them. The Chinese department. Carrie, you want to go first?
I am Carrie Wiebe Wilosher, and I'm also in the Chinese department since 1995. And I'm going to be teaching second year next year, and I taught first year last year.
Hello, I'm Wei and I teach, I came to Middlebury 2000. This is about 22 years. Okay, thank you.
Is Wang Lao should going to save her for a reason.
入行度我2004, but taught Chinese summer school in 2001, 2002. Teaching 101, 102, 103 this year, and 270. Hi guys. 好久不见。
宋可月老师呢？
Hi everyone, I'm Ke Song Lao Shi, and this is my first semester here. And yeah, I'm also living in the Chinese house. So welcome if you have activities.
Our two teaching assistants, Yulan Xin. Emma here. Hi, Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma Yulashi. I'm here as a teaching assistant. It's my second year. Mostly been teaching first year this year. It's a little bit of second year drill.
This is another profession. The Chinese major. Emma was a Chinese major in 2017. And Mo Kejia.
I'm Mo Kejia, or Kate, and I call myself the TA squared, like the assistant to the TA. I am like the assistant to the TA, yeah. I graduated 2018.5, also Chinese major, and was honestly inspired by Emma and her studies as a Chinese student to study Chinese and continue in my pursuit of Chinese studies. So it's been fun to be back here working in this role.
Different format and a bigger fashion, but Wang Lao is retiring at the end of this academic year after
2 weeks.
Yeah, so let's give her a alumni are here for the end of the Chinese department as we know it. Is going away. So I'll now turn this over to our alumni. The Chinese department has been endeavoring to stay in touch with all the alumni that requite our love for them since we've had alumni, which is now more than 40 years. I believe since the late 1980s, before Carrie and I got 94, Carrie got here in 95, which means we've known Shannon and Kate for 27 years. Before we got here, the department already had the tradition of every 5 years bringing back alumni for a big party up at Breadloaf. With panels where we talk about serious things, but also socializing. That last happened, I think, 6 years ago. It was supposed to happen either this year or last year, but it's been pandemic postponed. We hope it happens in the fall of 2023. We are very grateful to all of our alumni for making the trip back from Hawaii and Texas and Chicago and California. They have a lot they can share with you. They'll be very willing to answer all your questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to our alumni and allow them to talk a bit about themselves.
My name is Ravi, and I graduated class of 2013 with Tony. I actually came in with some Chinese background. So I skipped 101 with the first year. So I started with Wulashi, 200 level. Now I'm living in Austin, Texas, and I'm mainly in software engineering and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we'll get into it.
I don't know if that's on. Is that not on?
It's on.
It's on. Oh.
Testing. I'm already very loud, sorry. I'm Tixo Augustus, Aldishi. I took 101 with Bailauscher. We were his last class. And now, after gallivanting to many random countries, I'm back in the US in the last 6 months. So I haven't lived here in the States since Middlebury. I work in my own company. I do strategic financial consulting for companies who want to raise funds abroad, cross-border, and have a focus in preserving the environment or promoting social good in their local communities.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Huynh. I'm also class of 2013 with Ravi and I are good friends. I started off Chinese with nothing. I didn't know how to read or write. I spoke Cantonese at home, but my Mandarin was nothing. So I started from 101 here. Against everyone's wishes, I was a double Chinese and econ major. And I know we're not supposed to pick sides, but my Chinese degree was a lot more useful than my econ degree, to my own surprise. Right now, these days, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I spent a quarter of the year living in New York. I work for a company called Greenhouse Software. If you've ever applied for a job, you may have used my company's software. It's a applicant tracking system, which is how people apply for jobs and how people organize their recruiting processes. I manage a team of consultants. We help advise companies how to hire in a more inclusive, structured, organized manner.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Schaefer, Johnny Yuan, and so happy to be here from California. I was class of 99.5. Are there any febs here? I heard one other 0.5. Always glad it's a small but mighty group. I started Chinese after my Fed semester. I lived in a dorm where a few other people were studying Chinese, and they were super into it. And I thought it was like a little nudge. I didn't get it. And then I went to visit a class and I was totally hooked. So I had no background in Chinese. And then it became just a pivotal part really of my life, not just my Middlebury experience. And I've had a winding road, but I now work at Google in our people analytics division. So really what we're about is using data to help our leaders make good decisions about how they can support their employees to be happy, healthy, and do good. So I'm happy to be here and answer any questions you guys have.
Hi, everyone. I am Kate Pumarejo or Sukaidi. I haven't used my Chinese in about 20 years now, so you'll have to excuse me. I understand a little bit, but I haven't spoken in a very long time. I was class of 99, and then because I decided to add a Chinese major to my literary studies major, I ended up being 99.5. So an honorary Feb. I was a Chinese major because there were no other language classes open by the time my registration number came up. And we used to do this in person, like in McCullough, where there were tables and you had to go to the table and get a little card, and everyone else had packed up except the Chinese department. Okay, I'll try this. And I'm so glad I did. But I did use my Chinese a little bit in my 20s. I lived in Shanghai for a while. I wrote for the South China Morning Post. but it's been a long time. I went to law school after that with the idea that I would do something China related and then completely switch gears. I ended up doing public defense work. I fell in love with that. So I was a public defender in deep South Texas for a while along the border. And then I started doing capital post-conviction work in Austin. And then I more recently started at a mental health public defender's office in Austin. So we specifically represent defendants who have a mental health diagnosis and try and divert them out of the criminal legal system into community supports. So I'm really, really glad to be here. And I look forward to talking to as many of you as I can.
If I've understood from Amy the procedure, I think what would be helpful is we start with one of the questions on the CCI handout that I gave to a few of you. So if one of you guys has a question circled in purple, we can read that question, and then we can kind of go back and forth. The conversation will go where it goes. And you can address your question to a specific member of our panel, or it can be to all of them together.
Okay. I have number 1 circled, so I guess I'll go first. What skills, knowledge, or disposition did you learn as a Chinese major have translated effectively in your career?
Tony, can I ask that of you first? Because
Yeah,
you mentioned econ and Chinese, and so I'm interested in what from the Chinese major is helpful in what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say 2 things. The first is, you know that feeling where you walk out of class and you're like, oh my God, I have to memorize 50 characters tonight. And I have a ton of reading that I was a Chinese major, so it's like I had to read 100 pages that Sheila should have signed me. I had to write an essay. And you're like that moment where you just feel completely overwhelmed. Constantly, probably for all 4 years as a Chinese major, that is what you experience in your professional career. Particularly, I mean, I work for a tech startup where when I joined my company and when I was building out consulting services, there were no goals that were clearly defined for me. There was no responsibilities like you must do this. It's not like school where it's like you get a good grade, yay. It's kind of like, did you do the thing that we need you to do, but we don't know what it is yet. You just gotta figure it out. And that level of feeling overwhelmed and knowing where to start and strategize was something that I found really helpful. And like that I got from Chinese, because you had to learn how to memorize characters really efficiently. Like how do you recall, how do you synthesize all the information that you learned? Just like the complexity and the variety of what you learn with both literary analysis as well as character memorization really helped me when it came to dealing with a mountain of work in my professional career.
And Tixo, you said that your Chinese language skills were part of the reason you got one of your first jobs.
Yes, that's right. So I was also a double major with econ. And so, I was, I went to the Hawkins program after Middlebury. And so my job was half luck, but I have quite an opinion on luck. I think, first of all, luck is abundant, and everyone is lucky. But think of luck as wind, and you are building a sailboat. And until you build that boat and put up the sails, you can't catch that luck. And so I caught my luck, basically. And I would say that I went to, during the summer, I was having dinner with a friend and her aunt was worked in a mining company, and then a Chinese mining company who banked with South African bankers. And she said, hey, you're African and you speak Chinese, come to dinner. And so I did. And that's how my job started. But my boss looked at me one day and he basically said, I didn't really hire you because you're an econ major. I'm banking, I can teach you. Chinese, I cannot. And so he basically hired me because I spoke Chinese. And it was being able to bring sort of those cultures and processes together that he really appreciated.
Thank you.
I think there's like 3 different layers you can look at this question, because there's benefits to learning languages as a whole. There's benefits to learning Chinese, the language, just Chinese, and then there's the benefit of learning Chinese at Middlebury. And I think over the years, I've seen the difference. I've done a whole bunch of other languages. I actually recently started doing ASL, which is a visual language. It's a 3D visual physical language. And it's very different, and it works different parts of my brain. And I think language as a whole is useful for the brain, for focus, for memory, for attention. Also, it's useful for cultural connection. And I think that's like something that's become more and more important to me, especially post-pandemic, frankly, that we also saw a rise in populism and like that whole thing. And so actually navigating that with the backing of like knowing how to approach different cultures and knowing how to like come as an outsider, right? Like I'm, ethnically Indian and I don't have any natural connections, but Middlebury really exposes you a lot to navigating that. I mean, the literature part of it is not a joke. It's like you have to go study abroad is like huge. It's actually living, like you can learn from books, but when you actually go, I'm sorry. So like, I'm just saying like that stuff, that has stuck with me. In terms of actual like my day-to-day job in tech, it hasn't been super helpful, honestly. Like there are no characters. What I will say is there's symbolic thinking, and characters is a huge repository for that way of going through the world. It also is very helpful learning other languages, because something, not to nerd out a little bit, but like characters are semantic based, right? They hold meaning. And so when you learn the languages, you realize how the words are different words. Like it's something that would be the same word in one language might be 2 different words in Chinese because of the meaning difference. And that carries. Learning how to read documentation, that kind of stuff, really technical language, sitting and parsing through things. It helps with your attention span as well, which is also something that's lacking. So it's like, I don't use Chinese day to day, but what you get from language, Chinese, Middlebury Chinese, and also just a liberal arts program, I think is pretty applicable across the board.
All of what all of you shared totally resonates. I remember hours spent writing characters, and that kind of diligence and effort is something that is useful to build up the muscle for and the ability to sit down and push through something that's really difficult. I think of it for me as similar in some ways to how you talked about luck. I think of the Chinese is kind of an attention getter. It gets people's attention, but it also is it's the fundamental skills that go into it that really persist and have allowed me to succeed. And there's also something about being an adventurer that is part of my experience with everyone I studied Chinese with. There's just this element of being willing to do something different, being willing to be sort of alone and part of a community. So this community is important enough to me that I'm here, and I flew across the country to be here, but there's also time that I spent really focused on my own Chinese skills. And so that ability to kind of develop myself and then to be part of a community are things that I can look back and see those threads in my life. In a more literal sense, I started my job at Google. I've been there a really long time, you guys. 15 years in July, which is unbelievable. I never thought I would be in any job for very long. But I started there in the localization department, which is the process of translating Google's products, which are things like Gmail, into all of the different languages and for all the cultures, for all the people who use them, which the global and inclusive nature of that really resonated for me, but it was my language skills that got me in the door. But that's not actually what I used. I used more other skills like program management and other things. So I'll stop there. I do something totally different now, and I'm happy to talk about that. But it's the fundamental things that got you interested in Chinese that you find the thread throughout this.
I have a little bit to add to that, but that everyone touched on a lot of what learning Chinese meant for me. I don't use it in my day-to-day life. I haven't in a very long time, but I think my biggest takeaway from being a Chinese major was something about how you can move through the world and being brave enough to follow something and see it through and stick with it and then be open to where it takes you. I didn't have a passport before my junior year. You know, I didn't think I would spend a year living in China. I never thought, and you know, and that turned into being interested in modern Japanese fiction and teaching English in Japan for a year. And I wouldn't have had, you know, that sense of adventure like Shannon was talking about, and bravery, and just a willingness to sort of follow a path without focusing so much on the destination, like really taking advantage of an opportunity and following it. And Chinese was really hard for me. I was that kid who came in freshman year who was not really prepared for living on my own. Like freshman year was really hard for me, you know, like overprotective family. And my first semester was really hard, and I could barely write any characters by the time J term came around, and I was really ready to quit. But something about it made me want to stick with it, and I sort of buckled down over Christmas break. And then when I came back for J term, I was back on track. And I think that sense of accomplishment, I did better as time went on. You know, I was studying with all these people who were like, some of our classmates were just like brilliant linguists, you know, and they blew me out of the water for sure. But I did have to bring this, and it's kind of dorky, but I still have that first kimchi. Oh my God. And like the paper is yellowing. That's how this is from that first Jingxie in J term, which was Professor Moran, and he wrote Hân in like huge letters, and he said, "Kate, I can't tell you how impressed I am. Way to go." And like so many different places, and I just think there's something about this department, the community. Some of my best friends from college are people I studied Chinese with. I mean, even after all this time. So that's a little here and there, but you know, that's kind of been my path, has kind of been here and there. And I really credit studying Chinese for giving me that sense of adventure, like Shannon said, but also sticking to something and seeing where it leads you. Because I mean, as you can see, like the possibilities of where a Chinese major can take you are pretty diverse. So.
Any follow-up questions based on what you just heard? Anyone? So we get back, yeah.
In general, for all of you, how often do you speak Chinese at your job or just in life?
I randomly spoke last week, but it was like it gets very ugly very quickly. I'm like, oh, never mind, just kidding. But no, in the beginning, I spoke all the time because I lived in Xiamen, and then I lived in Hong Kong, and my clients were in mainland. So, but then it sort of, yeah, for the first, I'd say 6 years, I spoke quite a bit. And then it basically just tapered off. And now it's just occasional. But I'll tell you what, some of these occasional conversations are phenomenal. From, you know, going into the immigration line in South Africa and helping migrant workers get into the country because they can't speak English. And the guy across from them is getting very frustrated, you know, and just saying, you know what, I'm not a translator, but I'll help you. Because obviously the person is scared. They don't know what's going on. To last week, I was speaking with someone who used to work in China Daily, and now she lives, she's Chinese in Austria, and her experiences with learning about Tiananmen and learning about, and she's from Inner Mongolia. And so I would say that the opportunities that I have are one of the reasons I learned Chinese.
I don't use it at all, just with code stuff. Every so often I'll have coworkers and that'll happen. What I did do is actually started teaching Chinese at Cisco. And it was just like a lunch thing. Then there were enough people who wanted to do it. And that, like, there are so many ways that you can introduce it into your life, because Chinese especially is like just a fascinating thing for most people. Language is a fascinating thing for most people. So it's like, it's a really good way to network and build. Like, the cool thing is, like, when you're working in your department, it's so easy to just be locked into those people. Then you open it up and all of a sudden you're meeting salespeople and like support people and people you would never otherwise meet. So like, that's like one thing. That was only for like, that was for 2 years. It was like a, I mean, it's longer than I expected, but you know, it's like a cool way, even if it's not day to day. Otherwise, like, I'll pick up some poetry in here every so often. You know? I always like literature more. I don't use that as much as I do. I actually speak, if I don't know the word in Cantonese, I'll use Mandarin now instead of English. With my parents, I consume a lot of Chinese media still. Like, I watch a lot of Chinese movies and some TV shows, and I love karaoke. I'm really grateful plug for if you're like, I hate traditional characters, like a lot of karaoke is traditional, and I'm really glad that I kept with it with all 4 years. It's really
Karaoke?
Yeah, because most of the MVs are created in Taiwan.
I definitely do not use it for karaoke. I don't use it day to day now, but now hearing each of you talk about, I realize there are plenty of ways I use it. I did when I was in grad school. I went to the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and I like on the side to make money, tutored Chinese. And then and I did use it in a job. So the job that I was doing that led me to my master's program was I worked for an adoption agency in the China adoption program. And we would get every month a shipment of much awaited dossiers, they were called, which was information about each of the children who were being matched with the adopting families, the waiting families. And so I would translate those letters. And that was like the most amazing process to do. So, you know, when I look back, there are these moments that I used it, and totally different facets of life and different vocabulary than what you're learning now. So the adoption example is one, but I have 2 kids, and they're here off wandering around somewhere. When they were little, we live in the Bay Area, where it is possible to hire a Mandarin speaking nanny. So our nanny from the time my son was little is from Beijing. So he used to speak with a really good Râmphal, which was so cute. He remembers a little tiny bit. So if any of you meet him, he'll be completely embarrassed if you try to speak to him in Chinese, but you should. And so, you know, there are ways that it's woven into my life and my family's life. I'll add one more thing that I shared earlier. My husband actually, and this is weird because I never believed it would happen to me, but I married someone from Middlebury. I did not know him when I was here. He is half Chinese from Hong Kong. We met in Hong Kong years after school through a friend. And some of his family, it's much easier for us to meet in the middle. We speak Mandarin together rather than I do not speak Cantonese and they're not as comfortable in English, some of them. So that's another way that Mandarin turns out to be handy.
I probably have used Mandarin least of anyone in this group. I think I worked at the Fairbanks Center for East Asian Studies briefly. After graduating, I met a professor there who was at Usher's house one night, and then he offered me a job a little bit later, and he was writing a biography of Deng Xiaoping at the time, so I helped him with that. And then when I lived in Shanghai, I was trying to write for some of the expat magazines, but also the South China Morning Post, so I would, you know, use my Chinese skills then. But it's been a very long time. But you know, I was thinking about my children too. I don't use it at all, but then when we were talking about coming to Vermont, they were like, "You speak Chinese, Mom?" And like I got up to myself, and they were asking me like, "How do you say?" You know, and you know, it's not. It sounds silly, but I also like that they were like their minds were blown, right? And I'm like, that's, you know, that's what I want you to see. Like, get your minds blown by something, and find something that you're really excited about that sounds totally crazy, you know? So that's my challenge, but I don't speak it at all anymore. Although I did understand what Mulasher said to me. It was probably very basic.
Thank you. I realized I should have asked our question askers to identify themselves. The first question was Jordan Johnson, who's Jordan Yan Xiaolong, who's in 3rd year at the moment, right?
Yes.
And Sarah, you had the
Yeah.
Qing Sarah, who's in 2nd year, had the second question. So for everyone else, I'll give you a chance to identify yourself as you ask your question. Are there any other follow-up questions, or we can turn back to another purple question? Can we have purple question number 3, please?
All right, hi, I'm Kaylee, and the question, this one has a lot of parts. It's what were the steps you took to get your first job? How'd you get in the door? How it led to what you do now, and if anything you learned in your major played a relevant role.
Okay, I'll go first. I already had mine prepared. I was a senior and I was kind of a hater. I was like, whatever, Middlebury can't help me get another job. I can't get my first job. I'd applied to a lot of places, and my friend was like, oh, who was student government president at the time, Charlie Arnowitz. He was like, have you tried MidConnect, which is the predecessor to Mid to Mid? He's like, oh, like this, like, so like you could, like, if you just search the list and filter for like the industry and the region you want, maybe you'll find someone. And I'm like, okay, well, sure, I'll do that. Let's see what that leads to. And I filtered something like, I want to be in tech. I want to work for a small company because I want to like make an impact. And like have a communal feel like I did at Middlebury. And it came out with like a list of like 8 people, and I emailed all of them. One of them is actually my professional mentor, and he referred me for an open role at his company. And that's how I got my first job, was thanks to Mid to Mid or MidConnect. I will also make a quick plug that for most companies, 25% of the hires they make are referrals. So that is a great way to like get your first job.
So my first job after Middlebury, if you skip over, I stayed after my Feb semester and I was a substitute teacher in Virginia. And I worked at the Swift House. And probably some other things. But I remember that Wolosher had been a tour leader. And actually during school one summer, I decided I would work for the same company that Wolosher had worked for. She helped connect me to them. And I worked for this company to lead a tour. And I was like, well, the only thing I have going for me is that I speak Chinese, because I had not been to many of the places that this tour was going to. And unfortunately, my tour was made up of an extended family of Chinese Americans who spoke Chinese. So my cover was blown because I had nothing that they didn't have. But it all worked out great. They would ask questions like, is there a subway in Hong Kong? And I'd be like, yes, there is. And then later I would go home and look it up in the hotel room. But I did that. And then I wanted to continue something like that. I actually did not want to go back to China. I wanted to travel other places. But I ended up working for a company called Intrepid Travel, which is an Australian kind of independent small group adventure travel company. And of course, they wanted me to go to China because they spoke Chinese. And so they were primarily focused in Asia at the time. So I started off in China and did go to a few other countries as well. But that was my first job, and winding road to lots of others. But the connection often is through somebody you know, and that leads you to somewhere you want to be.
Yeah, I touched on this. I met a professor at Biologist's house one night. I moved to Boston and didn't know what I wanted to do, and swung by the Fairbanks Center and kind of just looked at their board and was kind of walking around, and I saw that he was in his office. And so I knocked on the door and I reintroduced myself, and he invited me to come in, and we started talking, and he's like, I need some help with this book I'm writing. I was like, sure, that sounds good. I don't, I was like living in my uncle's house. I had no income. And then I taught English in Japan for a year. He was also a Japanese scholar. And so then when I came back, he offered me a job. He was teaching a class at the JFK school and he wanted me to, forget the word he used, but basically he wanted me to take notes about everything he was lecturing on so that I guess someday he could have turned it into another book, which he never did, but I learned a lot. And yeah, it was just a person I met one night at an event that Alish was hosting out at his house. So totally serendipitous, but it was a lot of fun.
I think I said mine already, but I would add that I don't think I've had an interview where someone didn't ask me about China. I've had plenty of interviews where no one asked me about my skills. And then you'd be shocked, especially as you get older. People are like, no, you're in the business. We know that you can do what you said you could and you've been referred. And they just want to talk to you and make sure that you can get along and that you're interesting, you know? And so, I've been through many an interview where people ask me about China.
Tixo, was Hopkins helpful? Was Hopkins helpful?
It was, I think that it was a whole different set of vocabulary and a different way to learn, because I suppose for me, it was maybe third year or fourth year before I was learning in Chinese, you know, whereas in Hopkins, it was all learning in Chinese. So there was a lot of having to use that skill set, and you know, it wasn't a question of, do you know this word? It's like, do you know the econ? And then can you express it in Mandarin? So I found that super useful in banking. So it was helpful in that way. Was it as rigorous? No offense. But like, I did get a lot out of it.
Yeah. If seniors, I emailed about the Hopkins Center the other day. And so if you have questions about that, talk to Tixo.
Yeah. It's changed since I've been there. I would say that now, when I was there, you couldn't get a master's from it, and now you can, and that's a lot better, I think.
My first job after graduating was bilingual coordinator during the language school for Mandarin. So that was easy. And then afterwards, my second job was a translation for the Middlebury Film and Media Center. And then to get into software, what I ended up doing was a boot camp. And that was really, I mean, that won't necessarily be what you need, but what I suggest is like figure out what training you're missing and like go for that. And then I'll say this too, the first job, actually, almost every single job I've had since graduating has been through referrals or networking. And it's not a joke. You've probably heard that like 1,500 times. But now I think in some ways it's a little bit harder with the pandemic, you know, you guys coming out of that. But in some ways it's much easier because online connection is easier than ever. People are used to it. People can have online meetings. So like if you meet someone, people are so willing to help. So I would say like those literally like what Tony said too, like just referrals, connections, and then just like figuring out what you're missing and like attack that. And with Chinese, you guys know how to do that, you know. So yeah.
Follow-up questions to that, please. Anybody?
Ni hao, Ouyang Yutian, second year. Chinese house represent. I was just curious, you guys were talking about your first jobs, but did your first jobs like fully finance you, or did you have to pick up like, I don't know, Hannaford's checkout person on the side?
You mean like income wise?
Yeah, like income wise.
Well, Middlebury was a summer thing. It was like a one-off thing, the translation thing. When you're in tech, yes, it'll finance it. I mean, that's just like, it's a very lucrative field and one that is like only gaining popularity, gaining power. You know, like he's recruiting in that space as well. Like, yeah, totally. I wouldn't worry about that. It's for tech.
Yeah, I went into investment banking, so.
Yeah.
I did a lot of internships. When I was at Mid, I did an internship at a public interest law firm. I did one when I studied abroad in Beijing. I worked for the Philanthropy Research Institute that was connected with Beijing Normal to see if that was a sector I wanted to be in or live in China. And then I also did private wealth management, and I hated it because of the people and the politics and all that. So that just wasn't a fit for me. And I will say that I had a very interesting choice when I graduated from Middlebury. I'm first generation. And I was like, I wanted to financially help support my parents. But I also wanted to potentially move to China as well, to work there. And I just decided that I made a personal decision. I was like, I'd rather be close to family and also help financially support them. And I would be able to do that if I took a corporate position in America versus China. So, but yes, my first job paid very well, and I'd say tech paid very well. Like, instantly, I made probably more than my parents combined in my first job.
Yeah, so I think that this description shows you that there's a choice you can make. I had the luxury of not worrying too much and going to China first, where yes, it paid for all my expenses, but only in China. And I wasn't worried about bringing anything back with me, and I probably didn't worry about that for too long, and then realized that maybe I should start thinking about that. But for a long time, kind of what we talked about a little before about kind of sense of adventure and following sort of intuition and whatever I was interested in was something that I prioritized during years that I could. And it gets harder to do that depending on the choices that you make in your life. So I often took jobs that didn't support me fully, but I wanted to be doing other things. So I wanted to be teaching Chinese on the side, or, so I mentioned I worked for an adoption agency. I made like no money, and I got that job by volunteering to work there. I actually wanted to apply initially for a Fulbright, and then I was interested in then learning from the man who ran the program. And so I said, I'll just come work for you for a month. And I was waiting tables at night. And then that turned into a full-time job that was so rewarding and interesting. So for me, for many years, no, it didn't, but I think that's a choice and have the privilege to make.
Yeah, similar to Shannon, my first couple jobs, I was living with family, or I was living in China and support myself while I was living in China, but it was a while before I found a career that supported me fully.
Hi, my name is Josh. I'm a senior. And following off of that question, for those of you who worked and lived abroad after graduating, how long were you abroad for? And then what factors led you to decide to return and settle back down in the US?
I was abroad for a long time. I went from, I was lucky, and being adventurous is a huge part of it, being able to say, oh, I'll do that. So I went to China, London, Nigeria, South Africa. I'm sorry, I started in Hong Kong, by the way. I didn't start in, and I said South Africa, Ghana, Israel, and then Estonia, because I also wanted to tech for a bit, and Italy. Also, I have a GD. I really love to travel. So I was like, oh, that looks like a great opportunity. Which country? Great. And so I think that, so I've been gone for a while. I came back for a very random reason. Literally a missile came down 200 meters away from my house, and I said, nah, I'm going home for a bit. Yeah. Israel was a bit tumultuous, but that's why the people that I came from Israel, I just recently came back. And I would still go. I'd still go abroad again. Yeah, that's about it.
I think we're wrong.
I lived in Shanghai for almost 2 years, and it was actually I came home right around the time of SARS, which back then was a really big deal. Now we know like it really wasn't, but at the time it was kind of crazy. And I think I was trying to do freelance work, and I was really frustrated by the way it was being handled and the lack of access to information. And I started thinking about like what tools would I need to like effectuate change. So I was like, I'm gonna go to law school. Like I don't want to write about things. I want to be changing the narrative. I'm gonna go to law school, and then I'm gonna do some sort of like international human rights in Chinese, which isn't the direction I ended up taking because I got exposed to public defense. But that was the turning point for me was SARS and wanting to make the switch from like being an observer and to sort of being, I guess, an influencer somehow. And I thought going to law school would give me those tools.
Bringing me back. So that is a very specific point in time. Another very specific point in time was sort of a turning point for me. So I was leading tours on 9/11, and I was leading a Silk Road tour. I had to evacuate my group from Kashgar, and I also had to get another group across the border from Pakistan, which involved bribing some officials, and it was a crazy time. I think that was probably the turning point for me to feel like it wasn't fear, it was more like I felt like I had really missed an experience at home as an American. And I think I yearned to go home at that point. So then,
I'll also add one last point is there's nothing stopping you in your career, like even in your career, to travel abroad or to live abroad as well and work abroad. I have occasionally I talk to my managers of like, oh, he lived in China for like 8 months and I like worked there, and they're like, if we ever open an EPAP office, we'd like to consider like moving you potentially to Hong Kong or Singapore because we really think you're valuable. So there's nothing stopping you from doing that in the reverse direction if you start here.
Hi, tell me or Jonah. I'm a sophomore, and hopefully plan to go to China soon. So having never been there before, yeah, fingers crossed. I'm not gonna what, but hopefully we'll get to go there. And just having been there, would you say there's anything you wish you had known or anything you would have like really liked to do while you're there or wish you had done just during your time there?
Eat more food.
I'm on the mic, so mine's quick. Just, it's such a magical experience to study Chinese here, and you think, I mean, I cognitively knew that millions of people spoke Chinese, but I didn't know. So I got there and I was like, this secret language that Lauscher and Lauscher taught me works. I walked the streets of Beijing and talked to anybody that would talk to me because it was just the coolest thing. So, I don't know. How did that experience? Did I talk to you? No, everyone wanted to. So it's changed a little, but yeah, it's fun. It's magic.
I was really glad. So we used to go to Harbin, which was horrible and cold. And I mean, it wasn't. It was still magical and exciting and so different from anything I had ever imagined. But it was a hard place to live in some ways. But I was really lucky. I decided that I was going to do this SIT program. I don't know if they still have that, but it was like this like soc-anthro take on living in China. So, you know, it didn't really further my Mandarin skills in any way, but it was I appreciated being there and learning sort of in a less academic setting, I would say. You know, we had homestays. I lived with a Nashi family in Western China. I stayed in Yunnan, studied in Kunming, and lived at a Tibetan boarding school for a little while. So it was, I feel really lucky. And it meant that I graduated a semester late, but it was totally worth it.
So you did, after Harbin, you did that?
Yeah, I did J-term in Beijing, and then I did that in the spring semester. And I don't know that anyone else had done that in a while. It was sort of, yeah, Bilasher totally tried to talk me out of it. He thought that was a waste of time, but it was interesting. It was interesting. It did really further my Mandarin.
I'll go. I did the J-term program at Beijing, and then I did a CV school in Beijing as well. So I lived there for 8 months. Mainly because I'm like, I live here and there's nothing, like there's no one here. I want to live in a city of 20 million people and see what that's like, which is really fun. I think my journey with Chinese is like all about being humbled constantly. Like on my first class, I was talking about this with Lauscher today. I mixed up "wa" and "ni," so I kept saying "what jiao shen ming" to my like partner. It was embarrassing. But I think when you go to China, all of a sudden you realize like it doesn't matter what grades you got. in each of your classes. It didn't matter if you aced the Tingxue. What matters is, can I go to the grocery store and buy this thing? I remember like I had this moment of, oh my God, we never wrote the word for shampoo. And I'm like desperately wandering this aisle and like, what does shampoo look like? And I bought fabric softener and chicken soda. But what it instilled in me, like that, going back to the humbleness, what it instilled in me is like this sense of wonder, which everyone has kept talking about, of like, I just like opened my mind to like why, like there's so much in China that makes no sense. Sometimes you're like, why do people like J-pop? Why is this baby pooping on the street? And like you just get used to it. You're just like, you just stop asking questions to me. So like you wish your Zhongguo is what you say. And I really appreciated that. I also got to travel. I went to for my Yi, I studied like Muslim communities in China. So I learned about the Huizu and the Weiwarzu. And I got to travel with a mid-friend for our spring break to Xinjiang. I don't know how easy that is now, but we call it the journey to the west. So we did Xinjiang, Dunhuang, Lanzhou, and Xi'an, which was a lot of fun.
I regret not doing this. Like, I really wanted to go farther west and spend as much time with Shaoshu so as I possibly can, minorities, as I can, because it's super fascinating. I don't know how else to explain it. You will be immersed if you're smart about it. Actually, let me take a step back and say that's not necessarily true. In my time in China, you can see people who've been there for 10, 15 years that don't speak any Chinese. Spend time with Chinese people. Really just move. I guarantee you will make friends from everywhere around the world. People that you have nothing in common with and you wouldn't be friends with at mid and you wouldn't be friends with in general. But because you're foreigners, you'll have what we used to call China days. Or like, I'm done with China. And then we sit and be like, let's go to McDonald's. We were mad. We're like, I don't eat McDonald's, but I went that day, And I think that, so embrace it. Really don't make the norm that you're hanging out just with other foreigners because you miss a lot. And then go, anywhere you go is awesome. But I wish I'd spent more time with minorities.
I think, I don't know if this is good advice or what, I'll just tell you what worked for me. I was obsessed with grades when I was here, and when I was in China, it was the first time. First of all, I'm from the Bronx and my parents are immigrants. It was already a culture shock being here, rural Vermont, all these white people, but like it's different, and then you go to China, it's like a double culture. It's like this weird, I've never felt more American than when I was in China, in ways that I don't even feel like here now. So it's like, it's this random experience. And so I just put grades completely second. I was like, this is a formative experience in my life. And I cut class sometimes. Honestly, like I went to explore and I went to do things. And I like learned the Arhu. And I got like, just business Chinese was my worst class and I hated it. I love going to like Dui, which is like just a really one-on-one, like really get into the mind of like someone else and like have them share their culture with you. It was really, really rewarding. And I actually made the conscious effort. I made the conscious choice not to stay longer for J term because I went in the fall. I didn't do the J term because J term was also a beautiful experience for me coming from the Bronx, right? So like, I just managed both, right? I wanted the study abroad experience and I wanted the beautiful Middlebury experience and managed that. And I would say, like, honestly, things are so much easier when you're a student. You don't understand how, like, when you have that structure, you can do anything really. When you go and you have to pay for everything and organize everything and you have to book the Airbnbs or whatever, the hotels and all that, it's stressful. If you go there, just like meet people, even if they make you do those stupid Shouhui Diaocha, go and meet people. And like, that is so, it grounds it. I remember feeling like someone else was saying, like, I was convinced that Chinese is a language that like Chinese teachers made up. I was like, so you're saying that if I say this different way, it means something else. And I just, it's like weird cognitive dissonance that happens because it's so foreign. And you go to China and you're like, like you're just planted into the ground, you're like, go. And the thing is, like Middlebury students are so well prepared. I mean, like the Chinese program here is unbelievable. Like I've met other students who did study abroad, who didn't care about the language policy. I also broke that a couple of times, sorry. And I had mental health days. I'm just saying, like, it's overwhelming, you know? Don't like take this for granted, because the cool thing is you end up there with a bunch of people who are like, I don't know anyone who did Chinese who wasn't like insane about it. Like you were saying, like, I converted my first year roommate as well. Because he was doing French and he was like, I'm so, like, you guys have friends that like take that energy abroad, you know? Like network with your Middlebury people because it's super, super valuable.
I just want to add one last thing for all the Asian Americans in the room. I think when you go to China, it's a very different experience. If you're white, if you're brown, if you're Chinese. And one thing that was really meaningful for me is, I don't know why, I was just like, oh, when I landed in China, I was like, oh, everyone has black hair and looks like me. And coming from Middlebury, where everyone's like white, and like, oh, great. And then going to China was like a really interesting experience, and spending 8 months there of like giving me the language to be able to talk about my like racial identity in a way that I never thought I would have before. I didn't even think about that like when I started studying Chinese. And it was just like the way that people interacted with me and navigated with me. It was like, oh, they gave me a sense of acceptance that I don't think I've ever experienced in American society. And then I opened my mouth, and they all thought I was Korean. They were like, oh, yeah, it's fine. Like they can't conceptualize what a Chinese American is. And that was its own moment of like, oh my God, like what is my identity? But I reflected on that a lot when I was older. So.
Man, I would identity in China for me was hilarious. Like people would, well, first of all, I went, you know, a long time ago. So I got all kinds of things for being Black and female, you know. I think there was a Middlebury picture of a bunch of kids that I was swarmed in Beijing, like 50 kids that came up to me, and they were all just like, you speak Chinese! And you see their minds blowing. Like, I also got a funny question from kids who said, oh, you speak Chinese really well. Are you from Korea? Because they'd never met, they hadn't met that many foreigners. And I would just say, though, that it's still an eye-opening experience, especially as Americans. I think we take being diverse and being American a little bit more for granted. And I can't tell you how many people would look at me and say, you're African because you're Black, and all Black people come from Africa. And I was like, well, that's one way to look at it. It really is. But from an American perspective, it's not. And you know, you get pushback, and that's what it is. But I think that perspective, and there's so many different ways of thinking that you aren't aware that you're going to encounter, and you will, and it's exciting.
Can I ask? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to connect back to the original question, and then just wanted to comment on identity. As a white woman, it was a really different experience for me to be so othered. I'm from Texas, so Vermont was pretty different, but I don't stick out. In fact, I look like everyone else at Middlebury, so I would always have people come up to me and think I was someone else. I blended in way too much here, and so China, the experience was the exact opposite. So no matter what, China itself, that experience is intense, and you're going to be depending on a lot of factors on a different side of what the experience will be like, but it's always intense in my experience. The one quick comment was more about advice and what I wish I had done more of, and folks have all talked about EJE. I took cooking, totally take cooking. That was so great to do EJE. I would go with my teacher to the market. So things like that, if that's an option, I don't know. Or just take the nugget of what's meaningful about that, which is like find ways to live real daily life with people in whatever way you can, and maybe take academics a little less seriously, because other people I knew were doing like really deep academic EJE study. That was not for me, and that was the right call, at least in my experience.
Can I ask Emma and Kate to speak to this question about living in China? Both Emma and Kate would be in China right now were it not for the pandemic, but to prove that we're a big family in Chinese department, we've welcomed them back to us for the last few years. But they both have been there recently and maybe have something to add about the, yeah.
About living in China.
Emma was the assistant director of our program and is still in suspension, the assistant director of our program in Beijing when the pandemic forced her back home to Michelle. Yeah, just what advice you would give to when we're hoping they get to go to China soon, and if they do go, when they do go, what advice would you give us?
I guess the first or one thing that was coming to my mind as the panelists were speaking is in terms of spending time with Chinese people. I feel like this is it's always emphasized like hang out with Chinese people, don't hang out with your American friends. And I feel like in the end, for me, what was successful and for like a lot of students that I worked with, what I thought was almost a more successful approach was to try to have like a mixed group between like Chinese people and foreigners, because I feel like if you get too focused on, oh, I really need to hang out with Chinese people all the time, then it becomes sort of this weird thing where you're trying to like talk to Chinese people because they're Chinese. And it's just like linguistic situations are much more difficult when it's you and a group of Chinese people, like way more difficult than you one-on-one with a Chinese person, and also much different from you and like a few other foreigners and a few other Chinese people. I think those are the ideal situations for like language learning, for cultural sharing and that kind of thing. And also, I don't know if there's any content on this in, like, I don't think this is really discussed in any classes that I can think of, but there are some, I've like read some articles that are discussing identity in China and the way that when you're abroad and you're interacting with, you know, like your classmates of different races and from different like countries and stuff, you learn a lot from that too, about the way that Chinese people approach the world. Because if you're just like, I'm a white woman walking around China, I come to understand how Chinese people treat a white woman and like certain conceptions that they have about me. But there's a lot more to be learned when you're in a group and you're just learning from like all the different perspectives that pop up from the situations you find yourself in. Yeah.
Yeah, apologies first, because I'm kind of on China time today, because I was up until 5 a.m. doing a presentation for a class that I'm taking through a master's program. I'm currently doing a master's degree in China Studies through the Yanjing Xuetang, the Yanjing Academy of Peking University. And so I'm like, where am I right now? My head is somewhere else, and I'm in China, but I'm here. And it's kind of been like that for the past 8 months, kind of being split between two worlds and this weird experience of that. But yeah, when I think about my time in China, I was studied abroad in Yunnan and Kunming, and went back then the summers following my time abroad, and was planning to be there now. But I think I would agree with what I've heard a lot of people saying already. I think that one thing that I tried to remind myself to embrace was leaning into discomfort and leaning into the opportunity to make mistakes and the joy of learning language, and how mistakes can actually bring that joy to the forefront, and like this sense of discomfort of engaging with difference and sometimes feeling alone can ultimately lead, if you lean into it, to this discovery of just the beauty of difference in relationship. And I also think back to when I first got back from Kunming. I think I was a senior writing a thesis with Mulasher, and I remember reflecting on how it felt strange to feel caught kind of between two worlds, and talking a little bit about culture shock and reverse culture shock, and feeling like angsty and weird amidst all of that. And Mulasher, I remember you saying that once you've been abroad in China and you've had that experience and you've come back, or you've then traveled back to China, or once you've had the experience of being there and finding home there to a certain degree, you become a part of this new kind of community of people who are caught between two worlds. And I think that there's something interesting in that. And I relate back to and resonated with this idea of being alone, but a part of a community, and just embracing that and feeling grateful for that in my experience. So I would encourage, I don't know if there was a clear thread in what I just said, but encourage all of what I just said. We'll pass it on to someone else now.
Amy, we have till 6:30, is that correct?
You have this, sure, yep.
Or longer. Other questions? They can be a purple question or your own, or a hybrid, part purple, part your own. Anybody? Sam, you want to read yours?
I will, yeah. I'm Sam Christopoulos. I'm a sophomore. What advice do you have for other students of Chinese as they think about and prepare for their future?
So, I mean, once you read yours, we can make it a double question.
Okay. Follow up. Tell me about a time when you experienced failure, or what has been your biggest challenge and how have you handled it / learned from it?
I'm realizing we've covered a lot of the purple question content already. Yeah.
I'll go first. In my professional career, in my first job, I was at a startup for 3 years, and me and my manager made a mutual decision that I should leave the company. And I remembered it was my first job, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a failure. I suck at this. I'm not a good worker. I'm not hardworking. And I use that as like a time of reflection as to like, why didn't this job work out? And like going back to this whole like feeling humble and being like, why didn't it work out? And I remember one thing, this happened to me in my career, and maybe all of you can relate on the panel, is in like 2015, this is like a turning point. I think that was the question, is my uncle died very suddenly, and I never had anyone very close to me pass away. And I was working on a major project at work that was tied to like my team's goals. And so my manager at the time, who I eventually left, said, oh, I was like, do what you need, but we also need this project to be done at the end. And it was like 6 weeks until the deadline. And I made it, like, reflecting on that, like I did the project, but it led to a lot of unhappiness for me. And on reflecting on that, it was like, I will never work for a company that prioritizes their own profits and their own goals over mine. Like at the end of the day, like I get it, like we have to balance it all out, but that was like a hard lesson for me. Was just to like focus on myself first and when I needed
to. I started thinking of failure very differently at Middlebury. My first team share, I got a D. And it was the first time in my life that I'd actually made a concerted effort and failed. Like there were plenty of times I was like, I wasn't really trying anyway, it wasn't a big deal. But then when you believe that you can do anything and you succeed, you'll succeed. It's a punch in the gut. I remember I broke I slammed my mug outside just across the street out of pure frustration and anger and like belligerence. How could I possibly, and then failure, it became something different because in the end, no one that I've ever spoken to, even now when I speak Chinese, they go, you must have failed your first couple of tests in Chinese, eh? Your Chinese sounds like you missed your first team shares. And you realize that there is a process, and the older you get, the less it is about these one tiny moments that, there's that saying that I don't know where it comes from, that no one has ever drowned from falling in water. They drown from staying in water. And it's like staying under the water. And you need to just think of failure as, there isn't such a thing as failure. There's a process. Your life isn't one moment. And sometimes there's disappointment. That's real. That's very real. You have expectations. And as mid-kids, people have told you about how special you are. So it's very important, and you are very, very special. But failure does not negate that. And so you need to have that resilience. So I would say that about the the failure thing. And subsequently, things had not gone my way always. You know, I went into a startup, I was COO, and it didn't work out. And I think of that situation fondly. You know, and it's not it wasn't a moment of self-reflection, it was just a part of the process.
I don't have any specific examples of failure, because I think really the thing that I've learned over like 10 years, let's say since Middlebury, is learning your limits. And I think we're like now more than ever, we need to know that acutely. Like we're under so much pressure with, you know, everything going on in the world, right? And I think that's really like knowing how to balance your health in that, right? If you think that you can say yes to everything and do everything and, you know, feel like you'll just accomplish anything because you show up, it really doesn't work like that. I think like it's a little bubble where, you know, you have these learning moments that are crafted for you. This is what teachers do for you. They make you learn, right? When you go into the world, that's not done for you. And really realizing, okay, like sleep is something I need, or human connection is something I need, or, you know, choosing, like prioritizing things that matter to you, to your soul, rather than to your resume. You know, and like that's a struggle you're all gonna have, because like, you know, and I hope we can speak to that in tech even, but like, I feel like when failure is inevitable, and there's gonna be sometimes, like I recently started taking calculus, because I'm trying to apply to grad school, and I got a 65 on a test that I tried, and it's the lowest test I've ever had in my life. And I was like, it just happened, you know? And you know what? It rolled right off my back. Because why? Because I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was going there for. And the things that like mattered before just don't matter anymore. So figure out what that means to you. It's going to be different for everyone. You know, and we all have like our own backgrounds and our own stories and our own like things to do. Like make sure to prioritize that. And like you know, Tony was saying, like, don't ever, oh, I'm sorry. Like, you are so replaceable in a company. And really get that, right? Like you are not something special. As soon as they find someone who can pay, who can cost less and do the same job as you, they will replace you. Don't prioritize them ever. You know what I mean? Prioritize you and your health and figure out, are they helping you get what you need to do and balance it out? You know, because we all need to work at some point, but like never ever sacrifice yourself, your health, your well-being for any company, period. Yeah. No one asked for that advice.
Advice, like what would you? I just want to say, just to add to that, I had a great boss who said it so succinctly: you really can do anything. You just can't do everything. And until you're gonna have a hard time grasping that. Like, but it's very real, and remember it, especially because we're all overachievers. Find something, set your mind to it, be productive, be creative, be the best you can be, but know that not everything can be done by you.
Also, to Ravi's point, like, I had this realization in Chinese sophomore year, because I had friends who were saying like French and Spanish, and I was just like, oh, in 4 years, they're gonna be so much more fluent in the language than I ever will be. And I wasn't sure at that time, like, will I live in China afterwards? And I ended up not doing it. But like, knowing that you won't be as fluent as everyone else, it's like, but you're still taking Chinese because you still enjoy it and it's still fun. And or maybe you're just like a masochistic person, I don't know. I like had this freeing moment of like, if I'm never gonna be like super fluent, but I'm still taking it, like, what do I want to get out of it? And like, what pleasure will I get out of that? And that was like a moment that was really freeing of like, I don't care. Well, I still got decent grades, but like, I cared less about the grades and just more like learning Chinese, learning the words, learning how to interact with the world. So yeah.
I'll add and pick up threads from all of that. Just, I think what comes to mind for me is not a specific failure, but it's more maybe regret for moments where I wasn't as connected to the thread you've all talked about, which is, I think of it as knowing my truth and being tapped into what my intuition is, what I'm most interested. So we talked about that sense of adventure, and those for me, as I've reflected on my path so far, are like the shining moments and the the grand adventure of life. When I'm aiming for a more like resume ticking the box kind of thing, like I've achieved plenty of those too, but those aren't the ones that I'm proud of really. Or the moment that sometimes I had to sacrifice something because you can't do everything. So sometimes those are my failures, is where I chose something that wasn't as true to my actual intuitive self.
I have two very specific instances of failure, and I touched on the first one. I couldn't write my name after the first semester of Chinese. It was like my characters were way too hard anyway, but I couldn't write my name. I was so far behind. Everyone else was so smart, and they already spoke like 5 other languages, and I was like, I just don't want to do this. It's going to be too much work to try and catch up. But I saw this like glimmer of something like a little bit further down the road. And I don't know exactly what it was, but it kept me going. And that is one of the most important decisions I've ever made. And it led me to have the confidence to overcome my second biggest failure was that, so I went to law school in San Francisco, so all my friends were studying for the California bar. But I had this really interesting opportunity to go to Texas and live along the border and start like a public defender program in a county where until then people had been resolving their cases by going to the district attorney directly to like talk about their case, which is messed up on so many different levels. So it was this really interesting opportunity. I'd never been to Texas before, but like to me, Texas was kind of like China. It's like, whoa. I wanted to stay in San Francisco, but I was studying for the Texas bar. And so I didn't have like a Barbary class because I was in California and I was like trying to teach myself. I was trying to learn about oil and gas law. And I failed the bar exam the first time. And I didn't find out until after I had moved to Texas and I was starting this job and I found out I hadn't passed the bar. And that was, soul crushing. But it was the same kind of thing. I saw this glimmer like on the other side and I was like, I still want to do that. Like, look how it worked out with Chinese, right? Like, I still want to be, and being a public defender is so intertwined with my identity. Like, I'm so glad I stuck with it. It is absolutely in line with like my values, it's exactly, I ended up exactly where I needed to be. It took me a really long time to get there, but I don't think I would have stayed in Texas and studied for the bar exam otherwise. It was something about knowing that there's something just on the other side, and I really wanted that thing. And it was because I had found that thing in being a Chinese major, and I think that made me brave enough to study for the bar again. So. And hold on to this stupid little piece of paper. Okay, I just have to say one more thing. So on this, I got all of my characters right for the Tingxie, but I wrote my last name and then I wrote, I'm gonna say this wrong, Xiaojie, because I couldn't write this. I couldn't write the two, I couldn't write ID, but I could write two. So it did take me a really long time to learn how to write my name.
That was really beautiful and moving. Can alumni and faculty, can we collectively tick off some of the other things that we know that people who study Chinese or majored in Chinese at Middlebury are doing now? I know we have professor of Chinese at Arizona State University. We have high school teachers of Chinese. We have elementary school teachers of Chinese. We have medical doctors. We have someone in China who's been there for decades doing import export. I'm never quite sure what Tyler Cotton's job is, but he's been in China for a long time. Something to do with the digital world.
And tattoos.
Yeah. I don't want to cheat.
But tennis shoes, like Michael Tremblay, big.
He's worked at Nike, right?
He worked at Nike and 10 other different companies, and he's been in China and all over the place, back in the States.
Yeah. Jeff Graham was in Shenzhen for a long time, but he's now in the Philippines. But he's still connecting factories he's connecting American manufacturers with Chinese factories, right? Yeah. Brian Bethke founded a company in Shenzhen making electric guitar parts. And then he bought the company that made Jimi Hendrix's guitar. what else? We had someone who worked as the assistant to a really big deal Chinese painter for a while. Remember being in her studio. What else?
Lots of people doing non-China stuff
Yeah.
that's super cool. I mean, our friend Ariane
Yeah.
is at Loyola Marymount leading their, I think it's like their diversity, equity, and inclusion
Very cool.
program. Mara Yoler
Yep.
is an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Joy.
Yep.
She
Joy
works as a
Blauser.
curator,
Uh-huh.
and then-
She's a curator museum.
Yeah, in
Right.
Texas.
Yeah. Tara, of course, works for CET, and she's helping all these people get to Taiwan maybe in the fall.
Peter Swin has had about 6 different careers and is an architect now.
Okay.
Wow.
So the Amy and CGI, they have a written list. I was trying to do it from memory because we try to stay connected. And there's a long list of all kinds of different things that.
And the State Department.
State Department.
That's a really good choice now too. All we call it alphabet soup, you know, the acronyms, you know.
Yeah.
That's the Chinese word that we can't know about. That is really.
We do have some CIA people too.
Yep.
We can
Yep.
talk about it.
Yep. Agency people. Scott Tadlock's at Commerce. Donovan?
Yeah, so as someone who wants to throw myself into the alphabet soup, is there any sort of in?
Chinese. No,
Yeah,
but
well, I mean-
sincerely, it really, really is. I have to be honest. I heard they come recruiting.
They recruited language.
And language.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the language schools, they recruit. And then,
They
yeah.
come for the recruiting events.
Career. Guess we can talk about it more later, but for sure, if that's something that you want to do.
And you should always have good relationships with your Chinese teachers, because we'll be writing you recommendation letters for probably about 10 years or so. Because we know you more than anybody else. We have more anecdotes, so make the anecdotes good.
And don't forget about mid to mid, you can look in there.
Right.
Chinese majors in there.
Before we break up, are there any last questions? Do our alumni have any last comments for that?
I just want to say one thing about, are any of you looking at tech specifically or remotely on the radar? Okay, so I'll just say that the natural college in would be like web development or app development, but something that's harder but way more like what gives you more longevity, let's say, and like is just increasing the value of cybersecurity, and that also does relate to Chinese in a big way, in positive and negative. So just I just wanted to add that because people don't seem to be talking about that specific thing. They just give like the lowest bar of entry. But a lot of people who do tech stuff, they start with easy stuff, but that's kind of saturated now. So if you want to really apply your Chinese, it's a cool way. And actually, you don't even need to know how to code to do that. So people who aren't even doing coding now can still consider that.
Somebody just graduated last year, Jenny, who was doing cybersecurity for a year or two before she even graduated.
Yeah.
She decided
Oh, that's
to go,
right.
she decided to go
Nice.
for Burton snowboards instead in Japan. Yeah.
Thank you to the current students for coming over. We appreciate it, and thank you. It's so good to see you back.
Yeah.
Don't forget.
You want to build a little bit?
Mill a little bit. They all have slots available tomorrow morning if you want to pick up a conversation with any of them or all of them. And then I don't know where that handout, the sign-in sheet is, but. Okay.